Maria Santos had always been different from other recruits at Fort Braxton Military Training Academy. At 22 years old, she stood barely 5 feet 4 inches tall. But her dark eyes burned with a determination that made even veteran soldiers take notice. She had joined the army not for glory or adventure, but to prove something to herself and to honor her father's memory. Her father, Captain Roberto Santos, had died in Afghanistan when Maria was just 16. He had always told her that real strength came not from muscles or size, but from the mind and heart. Those words echoed in her thoughts every morning as she laced up her combat boots and faced another day of intense military training. The training camp was known for being one of the toughest in the country. Recruits came from all walks of life, but many left within the first few weeks. The physical demands were brutal, and the mental pressure even worse. Maria had been there for 6 weeks now, and she had earned respect from most of her fellow recruits through her unwavering determination and sharp tactical mind. However, there was one person who seemed determined to break her spirit. Sergeant Mike Thompson was a mountain of a man, standing 6 feet 3 inches tall, with arms like tree trunks. He had been in the military for 15 years and had seen combat in 3 different countries. Thompson believed that women had no place in combat roles, and he made no effort to hide his opinion. From Maria's first day at the academy, Thompson had singled her out. During morning drills, he would make her carry extra weight. During obstacle courses, he would time her separately and criticize every move. During hand-to-hand combat training, he would pair her with the biggest and strongest male recruits, hoping to see her fail. But Maria never complained. She took every challenge Thompson threw at her and pushed herself harder. When he made her do 50 extra push-ups, she did 60. When he criticized her form during weapons training, she practiced for hours after lights out. Her fellow recruits began to admire her quiet strength, but Thompson only grew more frustrated. The academy had strict rules about respect and proper conduct between instructors and recruits. Thompson was careful never to cross obvious lines, but he found subtle ways to make Maria's life difficult. He would inspect her bunk more thoroughly than others, looking for any reason to assign her cleaning duties. He would question her answers during tactical discussions, even when she was clearly right. Maria's bunkmate, Sarah Chen, often asked her why she didn't report Thompson's behavior to the commanding officer. Maria always gave the same answer. She wanted to earn her place through her actions, not through complaints. She believed that proving herself to Thompson would be more valuable than getting him in trouble. The Academy's training program included various specializations, and Maria had chosen military police work. This required additional training in restraint techniques, crowd control, and law enforcement procedures. Thompson was one of the instructors for this program, which meant Maria had to spend even more time under his critical eye. During one particular training session on prisoner restraint, Thompson demonstrated various holds and takedown techniques. He always used male volunteers for these demonstrations, claiming that the techniques needed to be shown with realistic force levels. When it came time for recruits to practice, he would watch Maria especially closely, correcting her technique with harsh words. "Santos, your grip is too weak," he would bark. "In the real world, criminals won't be polite. They'll fight back hard. And if you can't handle it, you'll put your fellow officers in danger." Maria would adjust her technique without argument, but inside she was building a careful understanding of every move Thompson taught. She studied not just the techniques themselves, but also their counters and weaknesses. During her free time, she would practice with Sarah and other recruits who were willing to help. The academy had a library with military manuals and tactical guides. Maria spent hours there, reading about combat techniques, psychological warfare, and military history. She was particularly interested in stories of smaller forces defeating larger ones through strategy and timing rather than brute force. One book that caught her attention was about David and Goliath battles throughout military history. It described how knowledge, preparation, and the element of surprise could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Maria began to see her situation with Thompson as her own personal David and Goliath story. As weeks passed, other instructors began to notice Maria's exceptional performance. Major Williams, the Academy's second-in-command, often praised her tactical thinking during strategy sessions. Captain Rodriguez commended her marksmanship and her ability to remain calm under pressure. Even Dr. Peterson, the Academy's psychologist, noted in his reports that Maria showed unusual mental resilience, but Thompson's attitude toward her never changed. If anything, the praise from other instructors seemed to make him more determined to find fault with her. He began creating situations specifically designed to test her limits, hoping to finally see her break down or quit. During a particularly challenging week of training, the recruits were put through what the Academy called Hell Week. This involved minimal sleep, constant physical challenges, and high-stress scenarios designed to simulate combat conditions. Many recruits struggled during this week, and some dropped out entirely. Maria not only survived Hell Week but excelled in many of the challenges. During a night navigation exercise, she led her team successfully through difficult terrain, while other teams got lost. In a simulated hostage rescue scenario, her tactical planning helped her team complete the mission faster than any other group. Thompson watched all of this with growing irritation. After the hostage rescue exercise, he pulled Maria aside for what he called a performance review. They met in one of the Academy's training rooms, a large space with padded floors used for hand-to-hand combat practice. "Santos," Thompson said, his voice cold and controlled, "I've been watching you for 2 months now. You think you're special, don't you? You think because you can memorize some tactics and follow orders, you're ready for real military service." Maria stood at attention, looking straight ahead. "No, Sergeant. I believe I still have much to learn." "That's right, you do," Thompson replied, walking slowly around her like a predator circling prey. "And one thing you need to learn is that in real combat, size and strength matter. All the book learning in the world won't help you when you're facing an enemy who's bigger and stronger than you." He stopped in front of her, his massive frame casting a shadow over her smaller form. "I've been too easy on you, Santos. I've let you think that you can succeed in this man's world. But today, you're going to learn the truth about your limitations." Thompson's voice grew louder, more aggressive. "In the field, enemies won't care that you're a woman. They won't go easy on you. They'll use every advantage they have, including their size and strength. If you can't handle that reality, you have no business wearing this uniform." Maria continued to stand at attention, but she could feel her heart rate increasing. Something in Thompson's tone suggested that this conversation was about to become more than just words. She began mentally reviewing all the defensive techniques she had learned, preparing herself for whatever might come next. "Do you understand what I'm telling you, Santos?" Thompson demanded, stepping even closer until he was just inches from her face. "Yes, Sergeant," Maria replied calmly, though every muscle in her body was now coiled like a spring, ready to react. Thompson smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Good, because class is now in session." Without warning, Thompson grabbed Maria by her uniform shirt and lifted her off the ground. His intent seemed to be to demonstrate his superior strength by physically intimidating her. What happened next would change everything at Fort Braxton Military Academy. The moment Sergeant Thompson's hands grabbed Maria's uniform shirt, time seemed to slow down. His powerful grip lifted her completely off the ground, her boots dangling several inches above the padded training room floor. Thompson's face showed a mixture of anger and satisfaction, as if he believed he was finally teaching this stubborn recruit the lesson she needed to learn. "This is reality, Santos," Thompson growled, holding her in the air with seemingly no effort. "This is what happens when you face someone with real power. All your tactical knowledge means nothing when you're helpless." But Maria wasn't helpless, and she certainly wasn't panicking. Instead, her mind became crystal clear, processing everything she had learned during her weeks of training. She had studied Thompson's techniques, his preferred moves, and his physical habits. More importantly, she had noticed something that Thompson himself didn't seem to realize. His overconfidence was his biggest weakness. As Thompson held her suspended in the air, clearly savoring what he believed was his moment of dominance, Maria made a crucial observation. His grip, while strong, was positioned exactly where she had anticipated it would be. During all those weeks of watching him demonstrate restraint techniques, she had noticed that he always grabbed in the same way, always positioned his hands in the same places. Thompson began to lean forward, apparently intending to slam her down onto the training mat with enough force to knock the wind out of her. This was the moment Maria had been unconsciously preparing for during all those hours of extra practice and study. Instead of struggling uselessly against his grip or pleading for him to stop, Maria did something Thompson never expected. She went completely limp, using her own weight and gravity to her advantage. At the same time, she brought her hands up in a swift, precise movement that she had practiced hundreds of times with Sarah and other willing partners. Her technique was flawless. Using a combination of pressure point manipulation and leverage that she had learned from advanced tactical manuals, Maria struck specific points on Thompson's wrists and forearms. The strikes weren't powerful in terms of force, but they were perfectly placed to temporarily disrupt the nerve signals controlling his grip strength. Thompson's hands involuntarily loosened, and Maria twisted her body in a way that turned his intended slam into a controlled landing. She hit the mat in a perfect tactical roll, absorbing the impact harmlessly and immediately springing back to her feet in a defensive stance. The whole sequence took less than 3 seconds, but the effect was dramatic. Thompson stood there, stunned and confused, staring at his hands as if they had betrayed him. He couldn't understand how a recruit barely half his size had escaped from what should have been an unbreakable hold. "What the hell just happened?" Thompson muttered, more to himself than to Maria. He looked at her with a mixture of surprise and growing anger. The fact that she was standing there calmly, completely unharmed and ready for whatever came next, clearly infuriated him. Maria remained in her defensive position, but her voice was steady and respectful. "Sergeant, you taught us that in real combat, we must use every advantage available to us, including our opponent's expectations and assumptions." This response only made Thompson angrier. He had intended to humiliate her, to prove that her weeks of success meant nothing when faced with superior physical force. Instead, she had turned the situation around and made him look foolish. His face flushed red with embarrassment and rage. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Thompson snarled, beginning to circle her like an angry predator. "That was just luck. Let's see how you handle a real attack." Thompson's 2. Our go. Maria knew that she was now in serious trouble. Thompson had clearly abandoned any pretense of this being a training exercise. His pride was wounded, and he was angry enough to do something that could get them both in serious trouble. However, she also knew that backing down or showing fear would only make the situation worse. "Sergeant," Maria said calmly, "perhaps we should return to the scheduled training program. I believe the other recruits are waiting for the afternoon session." But Thompson wasn't listening to reason anymore. His embarrassment at being escaped from so easily had triggered something deeper. All his frustrations about Maria's success, his beliefs about women in the military, and his need to prove his dominance. He wasn't thinking like a professional instructor anymore. He was reacting like someone whose authority had been challenged. "The lesson isn't over, Santos," Thompson said, his voice now carrying a dangerous edge. "You got lucky once, but luck runs out. In real combat, your enemy won't stop after one attack. They'll keep coming until one of you is finished." Maria realized that she was facing a choice that would define not just this moment, but possibly her entire military career. She could try to de-escalate the situation, apologize, and hope that Thompson would calm down. Or she could stand her ground and face whatever came next, with the skills and knowledge she had worked so hard to develop. The memory of her father's words came back to her. Real strength comes not from muscles or size, but from the mind and heart. She had joined the military to honor his memory and to prove that she belonged here. Backing down now would betray everything she had worked for. "I understand, Sergeant," Maria replied, settling into a more balanced fighting stance. "I'm ready to continue the lesson." Thompson's eyes widened slightly at her response. He had expected her to apologize, to show fear, or to try to escape the situation. Instead, she was calmly preparing to face him. Despite the obvious size and strength disadvantage, this unexpected response threw him off balance psychologically, even as it increased his anger. What Thompson didn't know was that Maria had spent countless hours studying not just physical combat techniques, but psychological warfare as well. She understood that confidence and mental preparation could be just as important as physical skill. She had also studied Thompson himself, learning his patterns, his tendencies, and his weaknesses. During all those weeks of extra training and practice, Maria had been preparing for exactly this type of situation, not because she wanted to fight her instructor, but because she understood that someday she might face someone who underestimated her abilities. Thompson's size and strength were obvious advantages. But Maria had advantages too. Advantages that Thompson's arrogance prevented him from seeing. "Fine," Thompson said, settling into his own fighting stance. "But when this is over, you'll understand why women don't belong in combat roles. You'll learn that there are some realities that all the training in the world can't change." Maria said nothing in response. Instead, she focused on her breathing, on her balance, and on everything she had learned about reading an opponent's movements and intentions. She noticed that Thompson was favoring his right side slightly, probably due to an old injury that he thought no one had observed. She saw that his stance, while strong, left certain areas vulnerable to someone with the right knowledge and timing. Most importantly, she could see that Thompson's anger was making him reckless. He was so focused on proving his point, so determined to dominate her physically, that he wasn't thinking tactically anymore. He was fighting with his emotions instead of his training, and that gave Maria an opportunity. Thompson moved first, lunging forward with a move designed to grab her and take her to the ground where his size advantage would be decisive. It was a sound tactical choice for someone of his size fighting a smaller opponent, but it was also exactly what Maria had expected him to do. As Thompson charged forward, Maria's training kicked in automatically. She had practiced this scenario dozens of times, analyzing how to deal with a larger, stronger opponent who tried to use their size advantage. The key was timing, positioning, and using the opponent's own momentum against them. Instead of trying to meet Thompson's charge head-on or backing away from it, Maria stepped to the side at precisely the right moment. Thompson's momentum carried him past her, and Maria used a technique she had learned from studying Aikido principles, redirecting force rather than opposing it directly. The result was spectacular. Thompson, expecting to make contact with Maria's body, instead found himself grabbing empty air as his own momentum sent him stumbling forward. Maria's carefully timed movement turned his charge into an uncontrolled rush that ended with him crashing into the wall at the far end of the training room. Thompson hit the wall hard, the impact knocking the wind out of him and leaving him dazed and confused. He turned around slowly, his face showing a mixture of pain, embarrassment, and growing disbelief. How had a small female recruit just made him look like an amateur? But the most humiliating part was yet to come. As Thompson stood against the wall, trying to catch his breath and figure out what had happened, he became aware of something that made his blood run cold. The training room had windows that looked out onto the main courtyard, and through those windows, other recruits and instructors had been watching the entire encounter. What had started as Thompson's private attempt to humiliate Maria had become a public display of his own tactical failures. Word would spread quickly through the academy about how Sergeant Thompson had been outmaneuvered by the smallest recruit in the program. His reputation as an intimidating and dominant instructor would be seriously damaged. Maria, still standing calmly in her defensive position, could see the realization dawning on Thompson's face. She felt no satisfaction in his humiliation, only a quiet relief that she had successfully defended herself and proven that her training and preparation were worth something. "Sergeant," Maria said quietly, "I believe the lesson is complete." The silence in the training room was deafening. Sergeant Thompson stood against the wall, his chest heaving as he tried to process what had just happened. Through the windows, he could see faces of recruits and instructors who had witnessed his humiliation. Some looked shocked, others seemed to be struggling not to smile, and a few were already walking away, no doubt eager to spread the news of what they had just seen. Maria remained in her defensive stance, but her expression showed no arrogance or celebration. She understood that what had just occurred would have consequences that went far beyond this single encounter. She had defended herself successfully, but she had also publicly embarrassed a senior instructor, which could make her life at the academy much more difficult. Thompson pushed himself away from the wall, his face cycling through various emotions: anger, embarrassment, confusion, and something that might have been respect, though he would never admit it. He looked at Maria as if seeing her for the first time, trying to understand how someone he had dismissed as weak and inadequate had just demonstrated such skill and composure. "How?" Thompson asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How did you do that?" Maria relaxed her stance slightly but remained alert. "You taught me, Sergeant. You and the other instructors. I listened to every lesson, studied every technique, and practiced until I could execute them properly. But the moves you used," Thompson said, shaking his head, "those weren't from the basic curriculum. Where did you learn them?" "From the advanced tactical manuals in the Academy library," Maria replied. "And from studying the techniques you demonstrated, including their weaknesses and counters, I spent my free time learning everything I could about combat strategy and psychological warfare." Thompson stared at her, beginning to understand that Maria's success hadn't been luck or accident. She had been systematically preparing herself for exactly this type of situation. While he had been focused on trying to break her spirit, she had been quietly building the skills and knowledge needed to defend herself against someone with his advantages. "You planned this," Thompson said, though his tone suggested it was more of a question than an accusation. "No, Sergeant," Maria replied firmly. "I hoped this would never happen. But I prepared for the possibility because you taught us that good soldiers prepare for every contingency. I simply applied that lesson to my own situation." The training room door opened, and Major Williams entered, followed by Captain Rodriguez and Dr. Peterson. Someone had clearly informed them about what was happening, and their expressions suggested they had seen at least part of the encounter through the windows. "Sergeant Thompson," Major Williams said, his voice carefully controlled, "would you mind explaining what's going on here?" Thompson opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. How could he explain that he had grabbed a recruit and tried to slam her to the ground? How could he justify turning a training session into a personal vendetta? Whatever he said would sound inappropriate and unprofessional. "Sir," Thompson said finally, "I was conducting an advanced training session with Recruit Santos. We were practicing defensive techniques for real-world scenarios." Major Williams looked around the training room, taking in Thompson's disheveled appearance, the way Maria was still in a defensive position, and the obvious tension in the air. His experience told him that whatever had happened here went beyond normal training procedures. "I see," Major Williams said diplomatically. "And how did this advanced training session conclude?" Thompson glanced at Maria, then at the windows where a few faces were still visible, then back at the Major. "Recruit Santos demonstrated exceptional defensive skills, sir. Her technique was impressive." Dr. Peterson stepped forward, his trained eye noting the psychological dynamics in the room. "Sergeant Thompson, you appear to be injured. Are you experiencing any pain or disorientation?" "I'm fine," Thompson said quickly, though his pride was obviously more damaged than his body. "Just caught off guard by the recruits." Improvement. Captain Rodriguez, who had always appreciated Maria's marksmanship and tactical thinking, looked at her with new interest. "Recruit Santos, are you injured? Do you require medical attention?" "No, sir," Maria replied. "I'm unharmed and ready to continue with the scheduled training program." Major Williams studied both of them carefully. As the Academy's second-in-command, he had seen many situations where personality conflicts between instructors and recruits had led to problems. However, he had also observed Maria's consistent performance and Thompson's obvious bias against her. The current situation suggested that those tensions had finally reached a breaking point. "Sergeant Thompson," Major Williams said, "I think it would be best if you took the rest of the day to reflect on your training methods. Captain Rodriguez will handle the afternoon sessions." Thompson's face flushed again, but he knew better than to argue with a direct order from a superior officer. "Yes, sir," he replied stiffly. "Recruit Santos," Major Williams continued, "please report to my office in 1 hour. I'd like to discuss your training progress and your future at this academy." Maria felt a chill of worry. Being called to the Major's office could mean anything from commendation to dismissal. "Yes, sir," she replied. As the officers filed out of the training room, Thompson found himself alone with Maria once again. This time, however, the dynamic between them had completely changed. Thompson was no longer the intimidating authority figure, and Maria was no longer the recruit trying to prove herself worthy of respect. "Santos," Thompson said quietly, "what you did today, it changes things." "I hope so, Sergeant," Maria replied. "I hope it means that from now on, recruits will be judged on their skills and dedication, rather than on assumptions about what they can or cannot do." Thompson nodded slowly. "You know, when I first saw you here, I thought you were just another recruit who would wash out within a few weeks. I never imagined." He trailed off, shaking his head. "You never imagined that someone my size could defend herself against someone your size," Maria finished for him. "But size isn't everything, Sergeant. You taught us that tactics and preparation can overcome physical disadvantages. I just applied that lesson." "You did more than apply it," Thompson admitted reluctantly. "You mastered it. In 15 years of military service, I've never been outmaneuvered like that by anyone, let alone a recruit." The two of them stood in silence for a moment, both understanding that their relationship had been permanently altered. Thompson's attempts to break Maria's spirit had instead revealed her exceptional capabilities. Maria's defense of herself had proven that the principles of military training really could allow skill to triumph over brute force. "Sergeant," Maria said finally, "I want you to know that I didn't take any pleasure in what happened today. My goal has always been to serve my country and honor my father's memory. I never wanted to humiliate anyone." Thompson looked at her with something approaching respect. "Your father would be proud of you, Santos. What you showed today, the preparation, the composure, the tactical thinking, those are the qualities that make exceptional soldiers." An hour later, Maria stood outside Major Williams' office, her mind racing through all the possible consequences of the day's events. She had defended herself successfully, but she had also challenged the authority of a senior instructor in a very public way. Military academies valued discipline and respect for authority above almost everything else. When Major Williams called her into his office, she was surprised to find Captain Rodriguez and Dr. Peterson there as well. All three men looked serious, but not angry. "Recruit Santos," Major Williams began. "Today's events have raised some important questions about your training and your future role in the military. Before we discuss those questions, I want you to know that we've reviewed the security footage from the training room." Maria felt her stomach drop. Security footage meant that there was a permanent record of everything that had happened, including Thompson's initial aggression and her response to it. "The footage shows that you acted in self-defense when Sergeant Thompson exceeded appropriate training boundaries," Major Williams continued. "Your response was proportionate, controlled, and highly skilled. You neutralized a threat without causing unnecessary harm to your attacker." Relief flooded through Maria, but she tried not to let it show on her face. "However," Dr. Peterson added, "the footage also shows something else. It shows that you've been preparing for exactly this type of situation. Your movements were too precise, too practiced, to be improvised responses. You've been training specifically to defend yourself against larger, stronger opponents." Maria wondered if this was good news or bad news. "Yes, sir. I believed it was important to prepare for all possible scenarios. Which brings us to why we called you here," Captain Rodriguez said. "Maria, what would you say if we told you that the military has special units that are specifically designed for recruits with your particular combination of skills? Tactical intelligence, psychological preparation, and the ability to succeed in situations where conventional approaches might fail?" Maria's heart began to race, but for a completely different reason now. "I would say that I'm very interested in learning more, sir." Major Williams smiled for the first time since entering the training room earlier. "We've been watching your progress for weeks, Santos. Your performance in tactical exercises, your psychological resilience, your ability to analyze and counter superior force. These are exactly the qualities we look for in special operations candidates. What happened today with Sergeant Thompson wasn't just self-defense, Dr. Peterson explained. It was a demonstration that you can think clearly and execute complex strategies even under extreme pressure. That's a rare ability, and it's exactly what certain units need." Captain Rodriguez leaned forward. "Maria, How would you feel about transferring to advanced tactical training? It would mean leaving the standard military police program and entering a much more challenging and specialized track. Maria thought of her father. Of all the hours she had spent preparing for this moment. Of the satisfaction she had felt when her training and preparation had allowed her to defend herself successfully. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she had dreamed of when she first decided to join the military. "Sir," she said, "I would be honored to accept that challenge." Major Williams nodded approvingly. "Good. Your transfer will begin next week. You'll be joining a unit that specializes in situations where conventional military approaches aren't suitable. Hostage rescue, counterterrorism, deep reconnaissance, and other high-risk operations." As Maria left the major's office, she reflected on the incredible turn her day had taken. What had started as another confrontation with Sergeant Thompson had ended with an opportunity that exceeded her wildest dreams. Her preparation, her refusal to give up, and her willingness to defend herself had opened doors she never knew existed. Word of what had happened spread quickly through Fort Braxton Academy. The story grew and changed as it passed from person to person. But the core facts remained the same. The smallest recruit in the program had outmaneuvered one of the toughest instructors using skill, preparation, and tactical thinking. For Maria, the most important outcome wasn't the recognition or the transfer opportunity, though both meant a great deal to her. The most important outcome was the knowledge that she had proven her father's words true. Real strength really did come from the mind and heart, and those who prepared themselves properly could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Sergeant Thompson, for his part, learned a valuable lesson about assumptions, respect, and the danger of underestimating people based on their appearance. He never again made the mistake of believing that size and strength were the only factors that mattered in combat, and he eventually became one of the Academy's most effective instructors, precisely because he learned to see potential in unexpected places. Maria Santos went on to have a distinguished military career, serving in special operations units around the world. She never forgot the lesson of that day in the training room. That preparation, determination, and the courage to stand up for yourself could change everything in a single moment.